But the idea is that it really is important to hear not just the histories, right? Like we're going to be talking about the histories of these religious traditions. But what's really important for our class is that we need to hear stories from women and other, historically marginalized groups who were part of these religious traditions, right? It's not enough for me to just tell you as an outsider. It's just my academic knowledge, right? Or even from the books that we're reading. So you're going to see that I incorporate a lot of other types of media. So if you're not really comfortable with reading at an academic level, that's totally fine. There's going to be lots of other ways to help clarify that information, including videos, articles, podcasts, recorded lectures on occasion. I'm going to be trying to record more. We'll be recording these class sessions so I can share those. But the idea is that hopefully there will be lots of ways for you to absorb this material, no matter your learning style. So the way that I'm going to be holding you accountable for the content that we cover, all this reading, is in two big ways. One of them is pretty informal, but it's a little bit more work. So that is going to be our weekly discussions, right? So I'm not going to be like, nitpicking your writing every week in terms of like, oh, you got that wrong and you got this right and that sort of thing. But it's just a space in our online Canvas course where you can discuss the content for the week with one another primarily and clarify any miscommunications you have, right? Because you're going to be hearing from me throughout the week and how I explain things, but sometimes you all are better at explaining things to each other, right? You can speak in ways that, maybe make a little bit more sense. You can maybe use references that perhaps I'm already too old and, out of touch to make. You'll get a TikTok reference from me every once in a while as me trying to stay relevant, but otherwise, right, there are ways in which you guys can elaborate. So that's what the discussions are for. So that's going to be a big chunk of the writing every week. But like I said, it's very informal, right? So it's easy points if you do it, but it's going to be a big, pain on your end in terms of your grade if you miss out on those, okay? So the other ways that I'm going to be checking your knowledge of the course content is in weekly quizzes. So those are the more formal ones, but the nice thing is that those quizzes are multiple choice, true, false. You get 2 chances to take each one. And because they're on Canvas, they're all open note, open book, right? So, right, a little bit more formal assessment, right? There is a right, there is a wrong, but there are lots of support mechanisms that you can use when you do those. And there's a lot of leeway and forgiveness if you don't do well the first time. I also drop the lowest discussion and the lowest quiz grade for the quarter. So if you miss 1 week, or if you just have an off week or whatever, something comes up, that's fine. Life happens. I've tried to set up my course policies to account for all of those types of things. So you don't have to freak out if you miss a class or if you miss an assignment. The other big thing I'll mention about the quizzes is that, and this is again, very generous, but it comes with a big warning. You can submit any work for the course at any time. So there are due dates in Canvas. And for discussions, there's a penalty if you submit late, but you can make up those points if you do a little extra work. For the quizzes, though, there's actually no penalty if you take them late. Caveat, warning. Do not wait till the end of the term to take all your quizzes, right? That's going to be terrible for you, right? You're not going to do well. It's going to be awful because they are each timed and they correspond with the curriculum we're covering that week, right? So the way I structure this course, because there's so many religions to cover, we're only going to be covering what are considered major world religions. And then I try to include some indigenous and newer traditions as well. But still, we're just scratching the surface, right? There's so many different religious traditions. So basically, it's 1 week at a time, we cover a different tradition or a different set of traditions. So the quiz for that week, right, after that week is done, we're probably not going to be talking about that religion again, except to make comparisons, right, as we go through and understand how these religious traditions have informed one another throughout human history. But so again, quizzes, you can take them whenever, but I highly recommend you take them when they're scheduled. It's going to be easiest for you. The information will be freshest in your mind. But again, if you feel like, I just can't get it done, not a problem. Deep breaths, not a big deal. I just want to make sure that you understand the content and you do the work at some point. It's not a huge pain for me, other than a lot of grading at the end of the quarter, potentially, to let you submit that work whenever. So yeah, I've already kind of unloaded a lot, so I'm going to take a pause for a second and just see if we have any questions so far. So please feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom, right? So I can kind of do that more quickly and we can get to the women and world religion stuff if you all have, gotten a little bit of a head start. So take a look in there, get a sense of what you think philosophy is, right? So again, we have kind of a lot to cover each week, especially since we're going to be just covering one religion or a set of traditions. And honestly, you could spend your whole academic career on just one branch of one of these religious traditions, right? They're so rich historically and theologically and philosophically, right? So there's so much to do. So we're going to be going through a lot. And so my big tasks for us today, but mostly next week, right, is to introduce you to the following things: philosophy, logic, feminism, and religion. And I mean these as like terms academically, right? So again, we're going to try to get a sense of what philosophy is. Logic is a subdiscipline of philosophy. I sort of referenced it already in terms of our papers. Some of you might be familiar with the basics of it if you've done any coding, if you know like conditional if-then statements, right? That sort of reasoning and inference is a logic foundation, right? And so logic is used to assess arguments. And it helps us do that in a way that removes us from the content of the argument, which is where bias can come in, right? So let's say I was trying to assess the strength of a particular argument, but the content of the argument was just so offensive to me, right? I could not get past how offensive the content was to actually assess whether or not the form of the argument was any good, right? And so basic format of an argument is something like this. If Pamela is a woman, then Pamela has 5 arms. Pamela is a woman. My conclusion is what? Who can guess? All your inferential reasoning skills. What's my conclusion? If Pamela is a woman, then Pamela has 5 arms. Pamela is a woman, therefore, what do we think? What follows from that? She has 5 arms, right? That's obviously so absurd. But guess what? This argument is valid, which means that if the premises were in fact true, the conclusion has to be true. And so that's what logic helps us do. It helps us separate the sometimes disturbing content of arguments, right, from discussing whether the structure of them has any ground, right? So if you were going to argue against this, right, of course, you could just say, well, of course, Pamela doesn't have 5 arms, right? Humans don't have 5 arms, right? But again, if these premises are true, then that is in fact the case. So what you really need to do is challenge premise 1, that if Pamela is a woman, then Pamela has 5 arms, because no humans have 5 arms, right? So even if Pamela is a woman, doesn't matter, right? So we can't just reject the conclusion. We have to look at the reasoning behind it. And that's going to be the big takeaway, I hope, for you from this class. I am not interested, this sounds terrible, I'm interested, but academically speaking, I am not interested in what you believe in terms of religion, right, gender, these types of things. What we're interested in philosophically is why we believe those things. What are our reasons? Are they good reasons? And if they're not good reasons, can we find better reasons? And if we can't find better reasons, well, maybe we need to consider changing our positions, right? So, but again, all of that is up to you. All I want to help you uncover or get to the root of is the why, right? So philosophy in that way is probably one of the most instinctual academic disciplines, which is sort of silly that we wait so long to introduce it in school. It was actually the first form of higher education. So like the ancient Greeks and ancient Chinese and ancient Indian traditions, they didn't have college like we did. They had privileged white men in the Greeks' case, right? Standing outside in their robes, having conversations in the marketplace. But that ended up becoming the very first academia, right? The academy. And does anyone know what the highest educational degree that you can get is? The highest degree you can get in school. We'll type in master's degree. So I have a master's degree, but there is a degree higher, PhD. Good. Okay. A doctorate. That's right. So the highest degree that you can get is in any academic discipline is a PhD. Does anyone know what a PhD stands for? A doctorate of, I feel like I'm Dr. Evil here. A doctor of, can we guess? Philosophy. That's right. So no matter what discipline you study, if you get the highest degree possible, you're a doctor of philosophy. That's because philosophers started all this, right? We are the ones who started asking the questions. And as you're going to read next week, or if you get started early this week, but we're going to be reading a short chapter by Bertrand Russell. It's only 4 pages, but he's going to be talking about the value of philosophy. And he talks a little bit about its origins and the idea that every single other academic discipline that's available for you to study now basically emerged once people came to a consensus on what the answers to philosophical questions were, right? So philosophy is the study of those questions, right? And once you kind of agree, well, this is what the answers are, then you're doing science, or you're doing psychology, or you're doing sociology, or you're doing anthropology, right? Or one of these other things. So philosophy is engaging in those questions, but in a much more unsured way, right? So the idea is that in philosophy, we are not confident there is only one answer, right? Or that we have yet found what that one answer is. And the idea that you're going to see from Russell is that that's actually a benefit, right? Because if you look at the history of other academic disciplines, especially the sciences, right, we haven't always gotten it right historically in our theories. In fact, we've gotten it real wrong, right? Really wrong in terms of models of the universe, right? It took us a while to figure out that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. It took us, we're still undoing a lot of the sexist and racist views in biology, right? Views about, what human physiology was capable of simply because of the color of one's skin, right? A lot of that stuff is still deeply entrenched in the sciences. So the idea is that philosophy is saying we should never accept that there is only one answer or that we have yet found it, right? So even if you think there is only one answer, don't ever think that you've found it. And that sounds like, a type of skepticism, and that's exactly what it is, right? So Russell and the value of philosophy reading is going to be encouraging a certain type of skepticism, or what we might today call intellectual humility, right? So there's a lot of things that we believe, right? And I'm sure we all have, hopefully, good reasons for thinking what we do. But for anything that you truly care about, right? So I'm just going to use a simple example for myself, right? I care about teaching. It's hard to care as much as I used to care, right? Like, life makes you jaded and stuff, but I still care, right? And so one of the things that I am constantly trying to do is be a better teacher, right? That's one of the things that goes along with caring about something, right? You typically want to be good at it. You don't tend to want to be good at things that you don't really care about. So let's say I was asking myself, what makes someone the best teacher, right? What makes a good teacher? Well, if I decided today that I knew the answer to that question, do you think that would make me a better or worse teacher than if I never think I found the answer and I always continue searching? I'd be a better teacher if I decided today I know what makes a good teacher, or if I decide I never know what makes it. Yeah, continue searching, right? And so this is where we get that old Socratic idea that, he was supposedly the wisest person because he claimed to know nothing, right? So the idea is that there's wisdom in acknowledging how little you know, right? And why is that important in our life today? Again, we are human beings. We are fallible. We make mistakes. And so if there is anyone, especially someone in a position of leadership, who's like, I've got it all figured out, I know all the answers, right? I can make all of the problems go away, red flag, right? Red flag. Okay. Nobody knows all the answers. Nobody. Okay. Nobody has it all figured out, right? Nobody is perfect. And so being able to embrace some type of skepticism, right, in life, Russell and philosophy is going to make the case that that is a valuable thing, right? That that's actually going to let you be the kind of person that you want to be. Hello, are you trying to steal mom's tea? Yes. Is it good? I need some rooibos. What do you have? What are you drinking? Something nice and warm. A day like today. I hope it's warm where you all are. Ooh, jasmine. Oh, very nice, very nice. There was one that Trader Joe's used to have. It was like a berry and green tea. Yeah, it was one of those things that they never have again. It was so good. Yes, good. All right. I hope you're all warm, but yeah, this is a nice segue away from my don't trust anybody. Right? Nobody's got it all figured out. No. But the idea is that when it comes to issues like gender and religion, this point in particular is going to be really significant, right? Because when it comes to the history of understanding who we are as people, right? What it means to have a certain type of identity, either a gender identity, sexual identity, religious identity, whatever identity demographic we're talking about, most of us have probably been socialized and raised with other people telling us what those things are or ought to be, right? What it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a Muslim, what it means to be a Buddhist, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, what it means to be heterosexual, what it means to be homosexual, what it means to be trans or not, right? There are other people telling you what the answers to those questions are. And the one thing I want to encourage you all is to decide for yourself. Okay. So that's the only thing I'm going to be encouraging you to do. I'm not encouraging anyone to change their minds about anything, right? I just want everyone in this class to be open to reflecting on not just what you believe, but the why of it, right? What are my reasons? Where did these reasons even come from? Are they my reasons? Or are they just things that I was taught that I never really questioned? Okay. And so I do want to prepare you that that is an uncomfortable process, right? It's why a lot of people don't like philosophy, right? Pretty much right away. They're like, I like my beliefs. Don't come anywhere near them. That's totally fine, right? If you are happy with your belief system, oh, you're so cute. Oh, what's his name, Celia? Hello, you're so precious. And I love your hair too. Happy. Yes, you're going to decide everything for yourself. That's right. Don't let anyone else tell you. Right? But the idea here is that we have been raised with people telling us. And so I want to encourage you all to question why you think the things that you do, and then discuss whether or not you actually think those are good reasons, right? Because most of us haven't even gotten the opportunity to ask those questions. Hi, Miles. Oh, like Miles Davis. Oh, so cute. All right. So Miles is with us. We're questioning authority. Mama's going to love that. You're like, he's not allowed to sit in all lectures anymore. But the idea is that, again, these beliefs matter to people's lives, right? And while we often think that people's beliefs are sort of off the table for us to talk about, we have to be honest that our beliefs affect our actions, right? This is going to be something else that Russell talks about in his paper, right? If you truly believe that someone is going to hell because of some thing about them, right? It feels a little naive to think that that belief is not going to affect the way you treat them, right? Right? Surely you're bound to treat people differently if you make such eternal judgments about them, right? And that goes again to the humility. Even in a lot of these traditions, we're going to have to do the theological work, the philosophical work of unpacking some of the inconsistencies, right? Especially as they relate to issues surrounding gender, right? So one of the issues that's going to be coming up a lot in our courses as we go through these different religious traditions is, and I'm going to drop some terms on you here, so I'm going to type them in the chat, is the androcentric language, which is male-centered, okay? And for anyone who has studied the ancient origins of any, here's another word, monotheistic, one God, monotheistic religion, right? The ancient texts don't gender language about God, right? That comes later when we translate into other languages. And if any of you have studied more than one language, you know that a lot of languages, especially the Romantic languages, they gender everything, right? Inanimate objects are gendered, right? It's just a part of the language. And there are some languages even today that are genderless, right? So when you take in, translations into account, right, and the way that language about God has changed over time, if you say that, men are made in the image of God because God is described as a man, well, you're not even being accurate to the history of the religion, right? God is not really described as a man. If you understand anything about monotheistic conceptions of the divine, they are infinite, right? They are so far beyond being limited by the human form of gender, right? Something as finite as that, something as imperfect as that, right? The God of the Abrahamic traditions cannot be gendered in that way. It would be to take away, right, from the vastness, the infinite power, right? That's why in Christianity, at least, you have elements like the Holy Trinity, right, to talk about other aspects of the divine, right? Not so there's when you talk about the divine in human form, that's different, right, than talking about God Almighty or something like this, right? And so again, if we're looking at reasons or potential points of gender inequity, right, which unfortunately is going to be a theme of the class, that is the world that we live in, right, we're going to try to pinpoint what is the source of that inequity. And if the source of that inequity is some misunderstanding of the religion, well, then it can be fixed, can't it? Right? And so we're going to see a lot of different views from what are called feminist theologians. Okay, so they are feminist in the sense that they are aiming for equality, right? Beyond just gender equality, you're also going to see discussions of people outside of the gender binary, right? So people who do not identify as either male, masculine, or female, feminine, right? But someone who could identify as both, someone who could identify as neither, someone who could identify as having a more fluid identity, right? One that changes throughout time, right? Or even two-spirit, different days, right? There are lots of different manifestations of this. But so equity for all identities, but focusing on religion. Excuse me. And so I'm going to share another link to my website. This is another place you can poke around. So you'll notice I have a section on my website called Gig Philosophy. Okay, so it's in a couple of places. It's on the World Religions page, which I'm going to share in the chat. It's also in some other places. But basically, this is just an overview of some of the main options provided to you by feminist theologians. And I'm going to share my screen. You can't open it on your end. So here, questioning your religion. Right, so the idea here is that if you are taking the approach that there is some potential inequity or issue, right, that needs to be resolved within a religious tradition, the feminist theologians have identified in general 3 main options, right, that you could take. One, right, and numbers 1 and 2 actually involve remaining within the religious institution. So this would be a way of saying, look, there's a problem, but we're not giving up on the tradition, right? And so the first way to do that is to pick and choose which sets of passages or texts you're going to emphasize, right? Because typically a lot of the issues that come up in theology or related to gender inequity have to do with, like I mentioned, contradictory things, right? Things that, contradict other passages or that contradict our intuitions about what's right or wrong, right? Things that seem particularly problematic. Sometimes it could just be that, that was just something of the time, but, that was a cultural thing. Our cultural norm is different. So we're choosing not to, pay much attention to that one. So, right, there are ways in which people pick and choose which passages they want to focus. And people might do this in, if you go to some sort of like Bible study or practice where you're studying a sacred text, you might hear people engage in these conversations, right? Well, oh, we shouldn't focus too much on that. We should pay more attention to this one. But the important piece is, again, the reason why. What is your reasoning for emphasizing one over the other, right? Is it a good enough reason to pick one or the other? And this is also important for the flip side, right? If someone is trying to weaponize religion against someone, right, and they're emphasizing, things that subjugate others, right, or exploit them, you might then ask, well, why are you emphasizing that passage over one that, focuses on equity and egalitarianism and kindness and, right, all these other things? So, right, it can be used in both ways. But the point is, there is a tradition, right, a rich tradition in every religion of picking and choosing which passages or texts that you want to focus on over others. You just have to have a good enough reason for why you're doing that. The second option is to say, okay, no, this is the text or passage that we're working with, but again, it's an issue of interpretation or translation or something like this, right? And so we need to work on exactly what wording we're going to be using, or if it's, some sort of analogy or metaphor, we need to reinterpret the meaning behind it. So for example, we're going to see one of my favorite examples of this when we get to the Abrahamic traditions later on in the term. We're going to hear the story of Lilith, right, who is an important figure in the Abrahamic traditions, especially Christianity and Sephardic, or sorry, not Sephardic. What is the word? I'm totally blanking. It's the mystical form of Kabbalah. Thank you. Kabbalah Judaism. The Kabbalah tradition of Judaism has a very different interpretation of Lilith than what we see in the Christian mythology, right? And so same story again, but different interpretations. And it's had very important influence on what that's meant for how women are viewed, right? So one interpretation is going to come out, having women making their own choices looking really great. And then the other interpretation is going to have women making their choices look not so great, right? They're full of very bad consequences. So those interpretations can be quite significant. And then the third option, right? The third option is let me share my screen again. Third option is the more radical one, right? So in some cases, you might say, look, there is no way to salvage these passages, these texts, these interpretations, or perhaps the institution itself, right, has just become too corrupt. And that, leads a lot of people to say, look, I still have my beliefs, but I don't have to stay within the institution that is problematic, right? I can experience or practice my spirituality as an individual, right? Or outside of an official institution in some more communal or localized way that is non-hierarchical, right? Where you're not giving special authority to certain people over others, right? Where everyone is in an equal position to read, interpret, practice, achieve enlightenment, whatever the goals are, right? And so in general, I just wanted to show you that to, again, reinforce the idea that as we go through these things, we are going to be picking at problems, right? Highlighting problems and trying to do the work of figuring out ways of potentially solving them. But again, it's not going to be up to me to tell you what the solution is, right? Whether there is one clear solution or which is the right one. Okay, so that will be for you to either decide as we go through the course or to intellectually, humbly say, I am not sure yet, right? That is also the case. So that is our time. Please feel free to drop any remaining questions you have in the chat or hang out. I do have another class at 11, but I'm happy to hang out for the next 10 minutes or so. And then just to review, please make sure to poke around on my website for the syllabus later today or tomorrow morning.